Hello there ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the World of Warcraft New Player's Guide. In this series we'll be covering some topics that aren't really that well explained by the game. This won't be a new player's guide in terms of very basic aspects of World of Warcraft, things like movement, questing, leveling up, things like that. They're covered by World of Warcraft's tutorial system. Instead we'll cover some things that players are just kind of expected to know. If you have any suggestions for topics that you'd like a guide about, let me know in the comments or use the links in the description to contact me. In this video, we're going to discuss macros, a very helpful, if somewhat complicated aspect of the game. Macros are essentially a way to manipulate World of Warcraft's design in order to help you do multiple things at once. Most macros are designed to allow you to cast multiple spells at the same time, activate abilities on targets without actually targeting them, or cast abilities depending on certain factors, like whether or not you have pets active, what stance you're in, or what keys you press while activating the macro. A macro, in essence, is a line of code. You're telling the game to perform certain things with a macro. This guide will take you through a few of the basic macros and explain what they are. So let's take a look at a very basic and common macro that I use. A macro that allows you to cast multiple spells at the same time. Now, don't panic when you hear this. There's no way to cheat the game engine to get you casting 100 lightning bolts at the same time. No. Instead, macros allow you to cast spells that don't share global cooldowns. Now, a global cooldown is the short, about 1 second long cooldown triggered by a spell once you press it. Most damage spells come with a global cooldown. It stops you from using abilities all at the same time, which would just be stupid and broken. So take a moment to look for abilities that don't trigger this global cooldown. These are very often spells that are for utility or movement, rather than direct damage abilities. The macro that we're going to be looking at tells the game to cast a whole bunch of spells that are not affected by the global cooldown. In this instance, there will be no spells that actually trigger that global cooldown, which means that the macro itself will not trigger the global cooldown either. This is great for a cooldown, which is exactly what we will be using it for. Our cooldown in question is Ascendance. This is, as a shaman, one of my biggest and most powerful cooldowns. As such, I want plenty of abilities to be used with it so I can get the most out of it. I'm going to be using 2 abilities alongside Ascendance. The first one is Elemental Mastery, which increases my haste. The second one is Spiritwalker's Grace, which allows me to cast while moving, which is very helpful for Ascendance. So, to create this macro, I'm going to type /macro to open up my macros window. Here, you have 2 tabs at the top. A General Macros tab and a Character-Specific Macros tab. Any macros created in the General tab will be shared across all of your characters, and macros made in the Character-Specific tab will be available only to that character. In the center of the window are your macros, sorted alphabetically. It's possible that if you have any add-ons that use macros, that some of your macro slots will be already filled with kind of strange and bizarre looking macros. Don't do anything with these, don't delete them or you risk breaking your add-ons, so just leave them alone. Underneath this central window is the individual macro editing window. Here, you will edit your macros. So, let's make a new macro for Ascendance. In the bottom of the window, hit New. A new submenu will appear. Enter the macro's name at the top. Make sure you call it something that actually makes sense, in this case, Ascendance. Don't worry about choosing an icon for it, as we will set the actual icon in the macro's code. But if you want to browse through the list and find an icon you like, you can do so now. Just beware though, if you do choose an icon, it will overwrite being able to set the icon in the macro, and this can potentially make things remarkably complicated. I would thoroughly suggest leaving the icon as the large red question mark to avoid this. If you've already changed it, you can find the large red question mark in the top left section of the icons menu. Once you've done all this, hit Create. Your macro now exists. Now we have to actually type in the code to actually make the macro work. One of the first things I do when making a new macro is to set up the icon, otherwise known as the tooltip. Since I like keeping things organized, I want this macro to have the same tooltip as Ascendance. So I will start by typing in this, #showTooltip space Ascendance. This will make the macro show the tooltip of Ascendance, but only after we actually finish editing it. So don't worry if it remains as its old icon for now. Now, onto the meat of the macro. We're going to start with the most important spell, Ascendance. We will type /cast space Ascendance. Make sure you type in the spell's name correctly. After that, we want to add Elemental Mastery, the haste buff. Type in /cast space Elemental space Mastery. Again, make sure you add in every single space to make it look like it's exactly the same spell as you would find in your spellbook. And finally, we want to add Spiritwalker's Grace that allows us to cast while moving. I'm going to type in /cast space Spiritwalker's space Grace. Remember to add in apostrophes when you do these. The spells must be typed 100% correctly or they won't work. After you've done this, hit save. Your macro is now done. To get it onto your action bar, just drag and drop the macro from the center window and onto the button of your choice. Okay, so that was our basic cooldown macro. Remember that spells trigger the global cooldown cannot be cast at the same time, and this can make macros not work. Make sure you test your spells to see if they trigger a global cooldown before putting them into a macro. You can only have one. Let's go a step further though. What if you want to use items that give you temporary bonuses like potions or trinkets? They can be put into macros as well. This time we're going to create a different macro, a Haste Macro, that casts Elemental Mastery, Berserking, uses my trinkets, and also consumes a Draenic Intellect potion. This is the macro I will press when I want to blow something up. Okay, so we'll repeat the process. New macro. I'm going to call it Haste Buff, remembering to keep things organized. No icon. I'll start by showing the tooltip for Berserking, but you could just as easily change that to be Elemental Mastery. I will type in #show tooltip space Berserking. Next I will add the spells. I will type in /cast space Berserking. And on the next line, make sure you press enter to enter the next line. /cast space Elemental space Mastery. Then I will add my trinkets in. Now each slot in your character pane has a number associated to it, and you can tell the game to activate your trinkets by typing in that number after /use. It saves you from having to type in the specific name of the trinket. So here I will type in /use space 13. Then I will press enter to make a new line and type in /use space 14. This tells the game to activate both of my trinkets. Finally, I will add in the Draenic Intellect potion. Since there are no numbers corresponding to bag slots, which is where I will keep my Intellect potions, we will have to tell the game to specifically use the item in question. So I will type in /use space Draenic space Intellect space potion. Again, make sure you type this correctly. This tells the game to use the item in question. Remember that /cast and /use are different and cannot be used interchangeably. /cast is for spells that you actually cast, and /use is for items that you use. Our next macro will cover targets. There are lots of ways to tell the game to cast a spell on types of targets, such as yourself, your target, your focus target, a Mouseover, etc. There's also a way to cast spells on specific targets as well. We'll start with specific targets, since they're fairly simple. Let's say that we're a healer, and we want a macro that targets the player, Matiki, who we want to protect and heal. We want the macro to cast Earth Shield on him. After that, we want the macro to target what we were originally targeting. Essentially, pressing the macro will make me cast Earth Shield on Matiki without changing my target to him. So again, we'll go to New, then we will call the macro Earth Shield Matiki, leave the icon as the question mark, and then we will type #show tooltip space Earth space Shield. Now that we have the right icon, we'll start by telling the game to target Matiki by typing /target space Matiki. Then we'll cast Earth Shield by typing /cast space Earth space Shield. Then we will return to our previous target by typing /targetlasttarget. Remember, that last one is all one word without any spaces. Now, this macro will make us cast Earth Shield on Matiki, and it will change targets so briefly that it will seem like we haven't changed targets at all. Remember that the macro will activate in the order that you type in the lines, from top to bottom, so it's important that you do it in the right order or you'll not target the right target before casting. Now, this macro is nice if we're always playing with the same players, but in reality, we won't be. We don't want to change this macro every single time we want it to target someone else. Instead, we can tell the game to target our focus target. Now, a focus target is like an extra unit frame that lets you see a target at all times. You can choose a focus target by targeting the intended focus and typing /focus. You'll get an extra unit frame. You can only do this to one target though. Okay, so let's say we want this Earth Shield macro to, rather than target a specific player, target our focus target. That way we can just change focus targets to change who receives the Earth Shield. This time, let's go back into our macro and edit it rather than creating a new one. Start by pressing change name /icon and change it from Earth Shield Matiki to Earth Shield Focus. We'll then press OK. Next, we'll actually edit the macro, starting with the part we don't want anymore. I'm going to go to the /target Matiki line and delete it. Then I'm going to replace it with /target space focus. Now, the macro will do the same as it did before, but instead it will target your focus target rather than someone specifically. Now, let's talk about Mouseover macros. These are very common and a really good way to cast spells without changing targets. A lot of healers use Mouseover macros, including me. I love my Mouseover macros. Now, these Mouseover macros are great for spells that you cast a lot, but on different friendly targets. They're not very good for damage spells, so let's stick to healing for now. So let's say you have a frame full of players you have to heal, like a group or a raid frame. You want to be able to cast your spells on them to heal them nice and fast. But to do so, you're going to have to click on their frame, press the spell, and then click on someone else and press the spell again. What if you could just hover your mouse over them, press the spell, and then move on? You don't actually have to target them. This saves a lot of time, and it's very elegant over the course of an entire fight. Mouseover macros are how you do this. To make a Mouseover macro for a heal, start by identifying a healing spell that's targeted and that you use a lot. In this case, mine will be Healing Wave. Make a new macro. I'm going to call it Healing Wave MO to signal that it's a Mouseover macro. Again, I'm going to leave the icon as a question mark. We'll start by changing the tooltip. I'm going to type in #ShowTooltip Healing Wave. Next, we'll tell the game to cast Healing Wave on whatever our mouse is hovering over. This is a single line. /cast space bracket target equals Mouseover close bracket space healing space wave. Now let's break that down. The /cast tells the game we're casting a spell. The brackets, not parentheses, brackets, which are the small brackets below and to the left of your backspace key, tell the game that we want the spell on a specific target. Next we have the target equals Mouseover section, which tells the game that the target of the spell will be whatever our mouse is hovering over. Then we have Healing Wave. This tells the game what spell we want it to cast on our Mouseover. Put together, this lets us cast Healing Wave on whatever our mouse is hovered over, without having to change targets or even target anything at all. This is really helpful for healing, and make sure if you do want to do this, that you change all of your main primary healing spells to this system. Finally, we're going to look at Stopcasting. This is a useful tool if you ever need to use an ability right away, and macros with the need to cast spells work well with Stopcasting. So let's take your Interrupt as an example. Mine is Wind Shear, and it is very important that I cast it as soon as I can to interrupt enemies. So, a quick macro for this will help dramatically. Same process, make a new macro. I'm calling it Wind Shear Stopcast. Question mark as the icon. Start with the tooltip. I'll type in #ShowTooltip space wind space shear. Then we'll add the Stopcasting component. I will type in /Stopcasting. I will then press enter and repeat it. /Stopcasting. We're doing this twice because sometimes the game can fail to recognize a Stopcasting command. 2 of them means that the macro will never fail to work. Then, finally, we'll make it cast the interrupt. I'll type in /cast space wind space shear. Again, make sure you type it correctly. Now, when pressed, this macro will make me stop casting whatever I'm casting, then cast Wind Shear instead. Nice for getting a really quick interrupt out. So that's a quick look at some of the common macros that players use and how they work. You can go into remarkable amounts of detail and complexity with macros, but these basic concepts should get you started and serve most of your macro needs. You can find all of the macros that we've created in the description. If you want to learn more about advanced macros, you can also use the link on screen now or in the description to go to a forum post that goes into detail about macros. It's not mine and credit goes to the person who wrote it. Be warned, it is for advanced players. So only really research this if you have experience with macros already. The concepts in this video should be enough for most players to get started, although this is by no means all of the macros that you can make. So that's it for this guide. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or suggestions for future guides, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. As always, I offer my heartfelt thanks to those who contribute to the channel through the Patreon system, with special thanks going out to Cody Wyatt today. If you want to help contribute to the channel and earn some rewards, you can find links to do so in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in the world of Warcraft. Even as the Dragonflights, the Night Elves, and Cenarius were fighting, a terrible turn of events unfolded. Somehow, some way, Neltharion, the great aspect of Earth, had convinced his fellow dragon aspects to pour some of their power into the creation of a weapon known as the Dragon Soul. This small golden disc contained power enough to annihilate armies. Siege of Orgrimmar was, let's say that heroic mode Siege of Orgrimmar was 100% raiding, and normal mode was 50% raiding. Looking for raid was 10% raiding, right? It was still a percent of raiding. Nowadays, it's like Mythic is 100%, Heroic is 60%, Normal is 40%, and LFR is 0%. There is no difficulty, there is nothing, there's no satisfaction. It's just a case of go in, get your Abrogator Stones, get your Epics, go. Too necessary? That was the healer dead. Alright, time to be a hero. Now things get difficult. We do have a res, hopefully she takes it. Until then, I will try my best to support this group. We will use our Ancestral Guidance at this point.